Criticisms of Mamdani. This is your brief but brief. This is part 3. Here are the other parts. Let's jump right in. We have to start with the very principles of democratic socialism, operating as a democratic government, but with the means of production being owned either collectively by the people or the government. Mamdani's policies, like many democratic socialists, have leaned primarily on government ownership, but mixed. Most production would still be owned privately, but the government would expand its footprint in public services as seen with housing and public transportation. Ultimately, it attempts to give the government a more active role to mitigate the shortcomings of capitalism, not replacing it. But the main criticisms is that this level of government centralization starts to float closer and closer to the principles of communism, just short of an authoritarian government, and that these policies sound good in practice, but difficult to achieve in practical feasibility. Starting with housing, some economists have warned that instituting a rent freeze could discourage developers from building new housing in the midst of an existing nationwide shortage, that tenants in the 6 million other units paying at market rate could experience an increase in demand, competition, and potentially higher rent. Mamdani disputes that rent, even when stabilized, has outpaced inflation and wages, so regulated units by themselves are unaffordable, and expediting the build of those 200,000 units would mitigate inventory concerns. But that is expected to cost up to $100 billion. Speaking of costs, free public transportation alone would have to cover an estimated $800 million in revenue lost. The MTA, who's in charge of issuing these bus fees, are a statewide agency, therefore being independent of the mayor. So Mamdani will need them to buy into his plan, but even they are already skeptical, as it could result in an up to 40% increase in riders, causing slower bus service. Mamdani's plan references the pilot program instituted on select bus routes earlier in the year, and emphasizes that the change to the city's transit infrastructure should account for the concern with increased ridership, but that also needs money in the hundreds of millions. Universal childcare would be the most costly of his endeavors, estimated up to $6 billion annually, not to mention that tens of thousands of better paid, qualified childcare workers would need to be in the pipeline to meet, let alone sustain, such demand. A demand that could also make it even more difficult for families to secure slots for their children. Mamdani argues that this would be a phased expansion. It would increase higher workforce participation by parents, hence boosting the economy through a broader tax base and reduce social welfare costs. Increased pay, benefits, and training would be made available to accommodate the demand for childcare workers, and his higher taxation on the wealthy should assist with funding. Grocery stores already operate at very slim profit margins up to 2%, and any incurred losses by a government-run operation would have to be subsidized through taxpayer funds, and that establishing these stores requires upfront capital and annual operating costs. Mamdani refers to existing models that have been successful,